Welcome to our office hour session today. I'm Joe Webby. I head up the Entrepreneur Residence Program for Harvard Alumni Entrepreneurs, and our session is driven by your questions. Please feel free to send me a message, a private message with your question, and we'll wait till the end of our guest presentation to take your questions. And we encourage you to please join HAE if you're not a member yet. HAE is all about connecting you to the community and resources that you need. We do that through our 14 chapters and our members-only mentoring and networking platform. Our guest today, Professor Debi Kleiman, is an award-winning marketer, teacher, and startup advisor, mentor, and angel investor. With over 15 years of experience working with and coaching startups of all kinds. She's the executive director of the Arthur Blank Center for Entrepreneurship at Babson College and is an HBS alum. Professor Kleiman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Great.
And of course, getting to talk to so many great entrepreneurs.
Thank you so much. The floor is all yours, and please go ahead and share your screen.
All right. Is it up?
Let me see. Yep, perfect.
Okay, great. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome and happy Friday. I'm really happy to be here today to share with you some insights from the book I just released in May. It's called First Pitch, Winning Money, Mentors, and More for Your Startup. And there's a really specific reason why I have that subtitle. I'm sure as many of you know, as you've gone on this entrepreneurial journey so far, that it's really not just about raising money. You use your pitch for all kinds of things to get advisors and to get customers and employees, and your pitch ends up being one of those things that is extremely important to the success of your startup. And a lot of people think the pitch is just, you know, that deck that you use when you present to investors. And in fact, it's really not. Your pitch is how you communicate your business in any situation, you know, and every opportunity to say something about your business is an opportunity to get someone involved with your startup who could be helpful. So it's really important that you start to think about how you can clearly and compellingly communicate what your startup does and what you're all about as a founder. So it was funny though, because as I started going around and doing webinars and podcasts once the book was released, and a lot of people would say, hey, that's so great. You know, you have a book about pitching. And the truth is, it's really yes and no. It is a book about pitching, but it's also a book about building relationships. And what you find along the way in your entrepreneurial journey is that you meet so many people, and it's those relationships that you build that are really going to matter the most. I work with alumni entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs every day in my job at Babson. I run the Entrepreneurship Center there, which is sort of the equivalent of the Harvard iLab at Harvard. And my whole job is around supporting and connecting and providing resources to these entrepreneurs in the various earliest stages of their startup. And what I found was there's all this angst around the pitch. You know, a lot of entrepreneurs aren't comfortable pitching or haven't really been asked to pitch in their lives up until this point. And so they get very overwhelmed by the process and feel intimidated by the process. And so I really wanted to write this book also to help people feel more comfortable with the pitch and feel excited to pitch, actually, you know, because it is exciting. It is exciting to tell the world about your startup and what you're building. And I think with just a little bit of practice, you can get really good at it, and it ends up being a lot of fun. So I always like to start my presentation off with a story. And this story today is about Ravish. And Ravish was a student of mine at Babson, and he's an entrepreneur. He also is a PhD in materials engineering. And he wanted to save the world. He had an invention that was a magnetic ink that you could put on labels, plastic packaging labels that would allow the plastic packaging to be more effectively sorted. So I won't go into all the detail about how this actually works and why it matters. Suffice it to say that this invention of his would allow more plastics to be recycled when they weren't being recycled today. And it was this incredible thing that he discovered how to do this, and he built it, but he really had trouble communicating it. He was kind of an engineer at heart, very shy personality, very quiet, and he really just didn't have the skills or the ability to talk about his startup in a way that people would lean in. And he was getting really frustrated because he had this great invention. He wanted to save the world, but he couldn't because he really just struggled to communicate about it. And we worked together for a really long time on his pitch. And what we started to do was realize that there's this whole story behind what he created that is important to tell. And the most dramatic part about it is that most people have no idea how little plastic is actually getting recycled in the world. And that's a surprising thing to people to hear. So we started to unfold the story that he could start his pitch with that talked about his insights about plastics recycling and really provided a lot of drama and activity around this problem he wants to solve for the world. And got away from all this technical detail and insider jargon that he used. And so he really was able to revise his pitch and tell the story in an interesting and compelling way that people paid attention to. And he went on to win a very big new venture competition at Babson. From there, he went into Mass Challenge, which is an accelerator program. He went on to win $50,000 at their pitch competition in front of 1,000 people. So he definitely started to lean into his ability to pitch. And the story of Ravish always makes me realize how important the ability to tell a story about your startup is, and how once you get it down and you're good at it, it can make all the difference in the world. So Ravish is now doing a paid pilot with one of the largest consumer packaged goods companies in the world to help them be able to use this magnetic ink on their labeling and allow for better recycling of their products. And so he has really just been such a great example of someone who you wouldn't think could overcome a lot of the things that were making it hard for him to pitch and put himself out there, and he found his groove, and it really worked out well for him. So I think you should all feel that it's possible for you. It is definitely something that you can learn how to do and get comfortable with. And we know that storytelling is actually really important. There's been a lot of studies done about how the brain works and how people listen. And we know that stories really sell. I have come from a marketing background, and what I learned in marketing forever is just using emotion and using storytelling is the best way to get people to really pay attention to what you're trying to talk about. Pitching and marketing are actually pretty similar in a lot of ways. They're both about trying to persuade people to do something or persuading people to act on something. So I feel like these lessons from the marketing world about telling stories and connecting emotionally are really relevant to entrepreneurs today. And so I think if you think about storytelling, people love stories, and studies show that our brains are wired to remember stories. And the reason why that's important is because having people remember you or being memorable is a crucial part to getting the kinds of resources and people involved in your startup. Not only so that they remember and can go on to help you later, but so that also they can tell other people about what you're doing and in fact create this ripple effect of communication for you. So being memorable is a really great part of your pitch, and so that comes out of storytelling. The other thing we know about how our brains work is that they are more likely to be in listening mode when you're telling a story. So when you're telling a story, they're kind of open, they're leaning in, they're listening, they're getting involved in the drama. And instead, when you're presenting very dry information, data, our brains naturally go into evaluation mode. And in evaluation mode, you're being judgmental and you're looking for mistakes and you're looking for reasons why this won't work. And for obvious reasons, you really want people to be in that open listening mode when they're hearing your pitch versus that evaluation mode. So again, telling stories is the way to get people to really be put in the context and the setting and the listening mode that you want them to be in. So some tips on this slide that I have for telling stories are actually pretty simple ones, and they also come from the marketing world, and this idea that you're going to choose words that connect to an emotion. So you really want to choose the words that you're using as you talk about your startup very carefully, because some words have more weight, have more imagery, have more emotion attached to them than others. And the example that I use in this case is the story of Ring. And Ring is a video doorbell developed by Jamie Siminoff. He's actually a Babson alum, and he went on Shark Tank to sell his video doorbell to the sharks on Shark Tank. And he kept talking about all the features and benefits of this great video doorbell. You could see who is at your front door. You could talk to them from anywhere. But he neglected to kind of create any real reason why people should feel something about this video doorbell. And as time went on, and he didn't get any investment at the time, and as time went on, he started talking about Ring as neighborhood safety. So he was starting to put these words that are very emotional together to represent his company. So now Ring was about neighborhood safety. It wasn't about a doorbell. And you can see how talking about it as neighborhood safety would then get people to feel something about it, right? Neighborhood makes you think of your family and your home and kids playing in the street and all these wonderful things. And safety is also a really emotional word because your safety is so important and it means so much to how you feel every day. So putting those two words together is like a really powerful emotional punch. The second piece of tip I have here is about employing a show me, don't tell me narrative. And this is the idea that you're going to show people about your startup, show them how it works versus telling them. And the example I use here to explain that is, feel the difference between you're visiting a new city and I take you on a tour bus and the tour guide tells you all about what you're seeing and putting it in context and telling stories about it, versus if you're in a new city and I just hand you a map and I say, go here, go here, go here, you're going to have a much different experience and understanding and feeling that city. So that's the kind of work you need to do in terms of thinking about how you want to communicate what your startup does, what it means, why you're doing it. The third piece is about metaphors and words that create an image. If you can use words that not only connect to emotion, but also create images in people's heads, again, that's going to lend itself much more to that storytelling mood, that desire for people to listen to you. And you know, one way to think about it is if I tell you to run 100 yards, or I'm going to run 100 yards, you might have trouble kind of knowing really how far that is. But if I say to you, I'm going to run the length of a football field, you immediately can visualize what that might be like. You can see the stadium in your head, you can see the grass, you can see the lines, and you can kind of know what running 100 yards really feels like. And then the last one is this idea of taking listeners on a journey. Most great stories, whether they're movies or books or whatever, the stories that you love in life are about taking the hero's journey. And the hero's journey kind of looks like this. You know, you start with this hook to get people interested. You're describing this problem. And as you're telling your story, the action and the drama is rising, and you're coming to this big climax where the problem is at its worst. So in Magnamir's story, in Ravish's story, he's talking about there's so many obstacles to plastics recycling and things are only getting worse. You are not recycling as much plastic as you think you are. You're spending all this time, you know, recycling at home, and it's not actually making a difference at all. And then at that climax, you're going to then talk about your solution, how you're going to help, and how the world becomes transformed if your startup is able to come to life. And then the resolution leaves you in this place where the problem is resolved and the world has changed. So this journey that you're taking people on when they're talking to you is this idea of you're taking them from the world before to the world after, and you're sort of telling the story of what happens along the way to get to the world after. So think about your presentation much more around this idea of helping people feel something about what you're building. Having some emotion or having some feeling about it can make a tremendous difference in how they take it in and what they do with it afterwards. Along the way of writing this book, I started to look back at all the pitches I've listened to, and I've listened to thousands of pitches in my work with startups over 15 years, tons and tons of pitches. And what I started to notice was this flow of successful pitches. Successful pitches kind of had this really nice narrative that made it easy for me to understand, made it easy for me to care, and then also made it easy for me to know what to do next. And I was able to sort this sort of into 4 sections. And I think the nice thing about this framework and how it's useful to you is the idea that you shouldn't have a script when you pitch. You shouldn't be reading lines or anything like that. But if you have a structure or a flow like this, you can kind of know what you need to cover in each section and kind of gradually move through each section. So I call it the 4 H's, and it's as simple as this. The headline is where you're setting the context. It could be 5 to 9 words or in a phrase that sort of sets the context for your listeners about what you're going to talk about. Maybe it's setting the context for the industry or why you're different. The next section is the heart section. This is where you're trying to make people feel something. You're trying to draw that emotion out through your storytelling. This is where a lot of people tell the story about why they want to solve this problem. And usually it's most effective if it's a story that's about an individual or about yourself versus kind of this generic, people really feel this way, and so this is why I want to solve that problem. So it's really important, if you can, to tell an individual story and make it very dramatic so people feel the pain of that problem. So that's what you're doing in the heart section, and that's the majority of your storytelling part. This middle section, the head section, is, tell me how it works. Tell me what I need to know to get all my questions answered about what your startup needs to, how the business model works, what's your target market, how are you going to go to market, what's the competitive set look like, all those kind of very factual things that people will start to wonder as now they've learned what your solution is and they want to know more. So the head part is actually the one place where you're being very factual and analytical, but at the same time, you don't want to let go of what makes your startup special. We don't really have time to dig into unique value proposition here, but if you don't know what a unique value proposition is, the short version is it's your secret sauce. It's what you do better than anyone else related to your startup. And if you can get a handle on that unique value proposition, ideally, you're going to weave that throughout the 4 H's, and you're going to keep bringing it up in different ways to show how that unique value proposition plugs into and is threaded through everything you're doing. And so that's where the head section becomes less boring because you're actually talking about your secret sauce, what makes you magical at the same time. And then the last section is your hope section, and this is where you're going to do your big finish. You're going to inspire your audience with your vision for change, what the world's going to look like after. And so in most of your pitch, you're going to be talking about sort of what you're working on now, where it is now, and the things that matter now. In the hope section, you're going to level up several levels to the world and the vision you have for this bigger thing that you're going to create to change the world. And so a lot of the hope sections start off as like, imagine if, or, wouldn't it be great if, or the world can be, and you sort of describe what your vision is, your big vision is for this company, so that people know that it's not just what you've talked about just now, but that you actually have this broader, bigger thing that you want to accomplish. An example of how this plays out is Airbnb. So I just chose Airbnb because almost everybody knows what they do. And the headline of Airbnb is book rooms with locals rather than hotels. So that is actually what they have on the first slide of their pitch deck from 2008 when they first started pitching Airbnb to investors. So the idea is that you're giving them a sense of, what the industry is, you're giving them a sense of who the target customer is, and you're giving them a sense of what the unique value proposition is here, which is the idea that you're going to meet locals. The heart section of Airbnb's pitch might have been something like talking about a personal trip to Spain. For me, it was my trip to Barcelona, where I spent tons of money only to end up in the most touristy parts of Barcelona, and I really felt like it was wasted because I didn't see the best parts of Barcelona, the authentic Barcelona. In the head section, you talk about it's an online platform, you're taking a % of the booking, it's a huge market, things that really get people excited about how it works. But at the same time, their special sauce is this idea of booking with locals and making it really easy to do that. So they're threading those kinds of comments throughout. And then at the end, the hope section is, travel is transformed. The world becomes a more connected place. So you can see where in that hope section, you're really leveling up to something that's much bigger, travel as a whole, the world being connected as never before, those are things that people can get really excited about, and they start to think, wow, I really want to lend a hand here, whether it's giving money or giving advisors or connecting, making important connections for you. They're going to be inspired by what you have to say. They're going to be inspired for your hope for the world, and they're going to want to jump in and help you. So the net of it is that I must say this like 20 times in the book. Pitching is personal. So you really need to be thinking about your audience the entire time you're going through your 4 H's in your pitch. You need to understand what their motivations are and why they're there and what they care about. And knowing your audience is also comes from the marketing world, you know, in terms of when you communicate with someone, a consumer or a customer, you really need to know what they care about and have insight into who they are. And so one of my biggest recommendations is that you do research on the people you're pitching to. Spend time to understand who they are, what they care about, why they're meeting with you, maybe what they've invested in the past, or who they know, or what their background is. You know, certainly now with online pitching, you have to start to establish a personal relationship online, which can be hard. So this is an opportunity to show them that you've done your research and that you know who they are and what they care about. So you can pepper that into your presentation, and the people that you're pitching to really appreciate that. So do your research before you pitch, know who you're pitching to, and show them that you really care, that they've taken the time to listen to you. It makes a huge difference in how your pitch is received. Additionally, in terms of relationships, coachability really matters. And what coachability is this idea that you're open to feedback and others' ideas. And it's also being thoughtful about what you're hearing. And you show this through what you say, certainly, and you also show it through your body language. So it's both a verbal and a nonverbal thing to show coachability. And the idea is that you're not being defensive, and you're being open, and that you're, you know, excited to learn from others who might know something that you don't know. Coachability shows up mostly in the Q&A section, and this is really the unscripted moments to show what you're made of. And the truth is that, again, relationships really matter, particularly at this very early stage of your startup. So people are going to want to get to know you, know what you're all about. And sometimes they're even more interested in knowing you than the startup. Sometimes it's just about the founder that an investor or a mentor or an advisor would want to sign up to help you because they're really intrigued by you as the founder. Because they know that the idea is going to change a lot as you go through this process of your startup. So sometimes it's not as much the idea, but you that they care about. So the Q&A is this awesome time to show that you're coachable, that you are actively listening to what they have to say, that you're building on their ideas, and that, you know, you're really interested in their feedback, and you follow up on their feedback. So what that means in practical terms is that when you're in the Q&A, be open to what people have to say. Don't be defensive if someone questions your assumptions. A lot of times they're not really looking for the right answer. They're just looking to see how you think through things. So let's say they ask you about your cost of customer acquisition, and they question some of the assumptions that you have. That's not a time to get defensive about what you did or didn't do. That's a time to sort of understand what they're trying to get at and show them how you think, because they're really interested in that too. So following up on feedback is also important. You want to make sure that you've taken the gift of feedback that they've given you and that you've thought about it. That doesn't mean you have to do everything that somebody says. In fact, that's the worst thing. You're going to get so much feedback as an entrepreneur. It's mind-boggling. Every day people are going to be giving you feedback. I wouldn't recommend doing everything that people say, or else you'll never find a track that you're confident in to go forward with. But you really do need to value feedback, and thank people for it, and be appreciative of that. And studies show that entrepreneurs who are coachable actually raise more money and get more opportunities to work with the people they want to work with. So that's been proven in the data. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about bias. So the entrepreneurial process is inherently biased, unfortunately, the way it is right now. We know that women get 2% of the funding, but own 38% of the businesses in the US. And we know that Black founders make up 1% of the venture funded startups, yet are 13% of the population in the US. This happens for a lot of reasons. A lot of the bias is subconscious. It happens a lot, but I'd like to believe that it is all very subconscious, and it's sort of a function of a lot of what we know today as the inequality that's built into structurally this process. So research tells us that there are a few reasons for this. Investors tend to want to invest in someone who is like them. So superficial cues are the first thing they have to go on. So if that person doesn't look like them, they subconsciously make this feeling that it makes them uncomfortable, and they don't know, they can't ascribe the same qualities to that person as they would like to. So like, for example, they might have expectations about a entrepreneur that's around how they look, and most entrepreneurs are white males. So if you're not a white male and you walk into the room, it's going to cause some dissonance for them. And this is a sociological phenomenon called homophily, and it's the idea that like is attracted to like, simply put. So the idea is here that you're going to face bias, but there are lots of things that you can try to do to switch it. And I call it spot it and switch it when it comes to bias, because it's going to happen if you're an underrepresented founder. So one idea is to sort of use that like is attracted to like as an advantage, and sort of show how, because you're not like them, you actually have unique insight to trends and information and spotting important things happening in our culture that maybe they don't have, and that unique insight is worth a lot of money. Another thing, and this is a lot related to specialty products or female problems. If you're trying to solve a specialty or female problem that a white male investor might not understand, you really need to sort of show them the opportunity in dollars and cents, and make sure that they understand how big that opportunity is, regardless if they don't understand it. Sometimes they'll say to you something like, oh, I don't really get this, feminine care product. Let me ask my wife and I'll get back to you. And the thing you want to do there is you want to stop them in their tracks and say, great, ask your wife, that's great, but let me tell you how big this opportunity is and how we're going to tackle it in the most unique way possible, and just get the conversation back on the rails. The other thing I hear a lot about is, for women in particular, is this idea of mom. You're a mom, how could you possibly run a startup? Or, lifestyle comments related to women pitching. And again, I say, turn it around, spot it and switch it, turn it to your badass self as a mom. And, I get more done in a day before 8 a.m. than most people get done all day long. So as a mom, I've learned to multitask and do a lot in a day and be really efficient and effective and build teams and collaborate, and all the reasons why moms make incredible entrepreneurs. That's where you want to switch it and move that conversation to that. And then the last thing is actually a really interesting research-based thing that we know that happens in pitching. It's a prevention question versus a promotion question. And this came out of a study done by some Columbia University professors, and they looked at pitches at TechCrunch Disrupt over 4 years. And they noticed that women were getting asked prevention questions and men were getting asked promotion questions. Now, a prevention question is this idea of preventing risk, preventing something bad from happening. And a promotion question is about growth and vision and building something big. And so if you get asked a prevention question, odds are you'll answer with a prevention answer. And if you get asked a promotion question, odds are you'll answer with a promotion question. But what kind of question you're asked really matters, because we know from this study that people who are asked promotion questions actually raise 7 times more money than people who are asked prevention questions. And unfortunately, it turns out to be women and underrepresented founders who get asked prevention questions. So what you really want to do there is, again, spot it and switch it. If you hear a prevention question that sounds like something, trying to mitigate risk, switch it around to growth, switch it around to opportunity, switch it around to something really big that they should get excited about, and don't let them make you fall into that trap of giving a prevention answer. This is a hard thing to learn, and one of the things I tell my students is just go watch a lot of Shark Tank or go watch a lot of pitch competitions, and you'll start to hear it. If you listen for it, you'll start to hear it, and as you start to hear it, you'll start to hear it when you're pitching too, and you'll know that's your cue to change the narrative and switch it around. And then lastly, again, relationships matter a ton. This is so important in pitching and building relationships in the early stages of your startup. Everyone that you meet along the way is a potential person who can help you succeed and can provide resources or connections or ideas or money for you. So building those relationships is really important. And these are, 4 other ideas I would like to give you for building relationships. One is obviously where you can get a warm intro. And then that is also about doing your research, knowing who you're pitching, finding a way to get a warm introduction to that person versus a cold email. Some people do get meetings through a cold email, but not a huge percentage. It does happen now and then, but really having a warm intro really matters if you can get one, if you can network your way to one. And given how many people have a digital profile today, you're likely to be able to find some way, maybe it's 2 steps to get to the person you want to talk to. Update emails. I'm a huge fan of update emails. So as you go along, collect emails of people that you meet, even if they don't invest in you, even if they don't offer to help you in that moment, collect their emails, ask if you can send them an email every quarter with an update on how you're doing just to keep them in the loop. These work really well because maybe someone you met along the way didn't do anything for you in that moment, but maybe they will later as they see your progress or they see you pivot. They might have something to offer you later. So keeping them in the loop 4 times a year with an update email, which is just a short update on what's been happening with your company, some of the KPIs, some of the great things that have happened, some of the things you need help with. That can be really, really helpful to keeping people in your circle, building your network, and they very often come back around with something helpful when maybe they weren't when you first met them. The other piece is the startup community is really small, so you should be really conscious that you're also offering help. Don't be just a taker, be a giver. Find ways to offer help to other people. Even if you think you don't have something to offer help with, you actually do. Everyone has a way to offer help. So every meeting you have, try and end it with, how can I help you? Now, how can I help you? Is there some way that I can be useful to you? A lot of times people will say, no, I'm good. But the fact that you even offered goes a long way to showing the kind of person that you are. And that leads me to my last point about authenticity. Be genuine. Don't try to be someone you're not. It will bite you in the end if you try to put on airs or be something that you're not in the pitch. And then it turns out that, you're just not who you said you were. So much about these relationships in the early days are about chemistry and about having this same set of values and being aligned goal-wise. And so you really need to let that shine through. The pitch is a great way to do that. You're doing a great job in your pitch if it turns into a conversation and they kind of just want to talk to you. So let that happen. Don't let that freak you out. Let that roll. I know many VCs who say, I don't even start the pitch until I know something about this person's background, where they grew up, what they're all about, because that tells me a lot about what kind of entrepreneur they're going to be, because they're looking for entrepreneurs who are going to blow through brick walls. They're looking for entrepreneurs who can create a movement behind what they're building so that they can attract customers and people to work with them and the best advisors. So they learn that through getting to know you. And so show your best self and let them get to know you. The last bit I added at the end, I wrote this book that I started in April last year and I finished in January. So there wasn't a thing called COVID-19 back then. And if there had been, I would have added a new chapter to this book about online pitching. Online pitching is really, it's difficult. I'm not going to minimize that, but it is still such a great opportunity to get in front of people and show people what you're about and talk about your business. So, some of the tips I talk about is amping up your delivery, trying to add a little bit more energy into your presentation with your voice and your body so that people are paying attention. They're sort of feeling your presence. They're feeling your energy coming through that camera. Stare right at the camera and talk to them as if that little bright white light in the camera is actually their face. Revisit your pitch to see if there are things that you can change it to make it easier to digest. And one of the things that I would suggest is that you make your pitch shorter. So take some things out to make it shorter, but add more slides. And the reason why I say that is because as you change slides, people people's attention sort of renews. So make sure that if there's a way you can shorten the pitch to just the essentials, but add more slides, that's a great way to keep people's attention. Stand up when you pitch online. Standing up helps you breathe better. It helps your engagement better. It really engages your body more in what you're doing. Check your tech. You know, getting online early and really making sure your tech is working is super important. Making sure you send the link out to where you're meeting right before you meet is a really nice thing to do. And control your background. I was watching a pitch a couple of weeks ago online, and the guy had his dirty laundry basket behind him. I don't think he realized it. But you know, we all have dirty laundry, but you don't want it in the background of your pitch. So make sure you understand sort of your environment, noise, whatever's behind you is, you know, neutral and isn't distracting from all the good stuff that you have to say. So that's all I've got for you slide-wise, but I'd love to take some questions from this audience and see if I can be more helpful to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Debbie. That was really, really insightful. We received a ton of questions. My Wi-Fi disconnected for a couple of minutes, so some of them wiped off, but I have a bunch here. Maybe we'll start off with kind of the whole, you know, entrepreneurship it's a team sport, and it's very relationship based, a lot of stakeholders. So what is your advice in terms of actually just maybe convincing the early co-founder, you know, to join your team?
Well, I think finding a co-founder is one of the most important things you have to do in the process of starting a company. There's a lot of data that says being a solo founder, the odds of a solo founder succeeding are very small. And it's really important to have that other person to sort of be the yin to your yang. Ideally it's somebody who has skills that you're not as strong in, and you can really complement each other. The advice I'd give is that it's very much like dating. I mean, you've got to talk to a lot of people. You've got to meet a lot of people to know where that chemistry works, because you're going to be together through a lot of difficult times. And you want to make sure that this is a person that you want to go into battle with. And so, you know, meet as many people as you can, spend as much time with them as you can. What I tell a lot of people is ask that potential co-founder to do a project with you, a smaller project with you, just to see how you all work together, you know, with no strings attached. You know, pay them a small amount of money to do that project with you, and that might give you a good sense of what it will be like to work with them. So that's a good way to kind of test drive someone, if you can carve off a small project to work on together and see how that goes. But your pitch comes into play here too, though, because you also have to do a little selling, right? You have to do a little persuading of your own to get people to, you know, be intrigued enough to have these conversations with you about being a co-founder. So again, it really matters how you present it, that you make it compelling, that you have a bigger vision for how you want to change the world that's inspiring and gets people to want to follow you.
Great. A couple questions here from Teka Thomas. He's asking if there's any trends relating to COVID using Zoom for angels and VCs. You covered a little bit of it. Maybe Teka, if you want to add more context to your question. Or Debbie, if, maybe there's some other advice you have regarding Zoom pitching or best trends.
You know, the truth is, I don't have a ton of data on it yet, but the truth is, you know, we're still learning a lot about what the effect of Zoom pitching is on people. I think as, you know, we all get more comfortable working online all the time, I think it's gotten better and better. But you know, honestly, the process will take longer than it normally would if you could meet in person with someone in these earliest stages. It will take longer and it will be harder because it's so much about building relationships. And it's hard to build relationships when all you have to go on is this online relationship for now. But that doesn't mean it can't be done. And I know people are raising money right now and they've been successful. So deals are not stopping. They're just taking a little longer, I think. And they're requiring a little bit more due diligence in terms of getting to know each other. So take every opportunity you have to create some small talk before and after your pitch, create opportunities to ask questions of the people you're pitching to. So, you're trying to be conversational. Whatever you can do to start building those relationships and not being stiff and formal with them can go a long way to starting to build that foundation that you need to, do a longer term relationship.
Great. Jay is asking, how long should a Zoom pitch be?
I think a Zoom pitch should probably only be about 20 to 25 minutes, the formal part of the pitch, because you really want to leave time at the beginning, maybe for some chatter and some small talk, and then you definitely want to leave as much time as possible for the Q&A. So I wouldn't do much more than that. Otherwise, you probably will lose them to a certain extent, but also, you want to leave as much time as possible for it to turn into a conversation and for them to get to know you and to be able to ask you questions.
Great. Jose's asking if there's any couple of maybe great pitch examples that we could reference.
Well, there are awesome pitch decks all over the internet. You can just go on. I have a bunch of websites on my book website, thefirstpitchbook.com, that has some great examples of good pitch decks. So those are really easy to find by searching. You can find Uber's pitch deck and Airbnb's pitch deck and some of these really classic companies. Another way to do it is to Google successful pitch decks, and you'll see some of the best out there. There are a lot of online free companies now that have templates for pitch decks that you can use that make your slides look beautiful and professional. I would say, even if it costs you a couple bucks, make sure those slides look great, because they say a lot about you and who you are and what you represent and what you care about. So it's well worth finding the templates to use to design in, or to pay a designer to make your slides great. Because again, now that you're pitching online, the slides have to do a lot more work, representing you.
Definitely, that's really, really important, the design. John is asking, how would you renew contacts with maybe an investor that you met and started conversation with and let go? How would you kind of bring that back in?
Well, I think the quarterly update email is a great way to do that. And so if you're going to start doing that, you could reach out to that investor that you met with and say, hey, listen, I'm starting to send out a quarterly update email to the people I've met along the way. I'd love to include you on that list. So it's a reason to reach out by sort of asking their permission that you can send them this email. It's a good excuse to touch base again. So you can say, I'm going to be sending this out 4 times a year. I would love it if you would want to get it. Would you mind if I put you on my mailing list? And then that's an opportunity to reach out and then start a conversation, because they might be like, yeah, that's fine. So what are you up to? And a conversation could ensue. People want to help startups, generally speaking. Like, a lot of people love to help startups, and if you can be really specific about what you need their help with, they're bound to do it. And that's what the quarterly update email does for you. It allows you to be really specific about the help that you need right in that moment. So the bigger your mailing list can be for that quarterly email update, the better, because those are people who are all going to see what you're struggling with, and then they might raise their hand to help.
Great. You do mention the 4H framework to create a flow for the presentation and engage the listeners. Bill Asher is asking, how do you put heart into a pitch for a business that's maybe primarily technical, B2B, advanced manufacturing, or cloud? How do you do that?
Well, you're still solving a problem, right? There's a pain point there that you're solving a problem for, or else you wouldn't have a company to start. So identify what that pain point is, and heighten the drama around that pain point. Really describe how it affects the user, and that could be a business person in a B2B situation. How does it affect them that it doesn't work well, or that it's inefficient right now? That's the same thing as, when you're dealing with a consumer and you're trying to make this emotional point. It's like, how do you bring to life the pain that you're trying to solve? And even if it's a technical product, you're still solving a pain. So what are the emotions that are attached to this thing not working right now for the person that uses it and the person that has to use it every single day? So
it's
tell a
almost
story.
like a persona and
Yes.
telling a story for that persona.
Yeah, so sometimes, if you don't actually have an actual person to tell a story about, make one up, make one up. I was talking to this executive, or I've been in this industry for 20 years and I know this firsthand, or, I met so-and-so and they really, really brought this to life for me by sharing this story with me. And you can make up a story that really highlights the pain point. It doesn't have to be completely factual. The point is that it's about an individual and it's about highlighting how this pain point affects them.
Great. Ali's asking, how do you get rid of the deck entirely and just tell the story?
Well, that's great if you can do that. And that's, I think, where the 4H framework is really helpful, because it just keeps you in a flow without being scripted and without being reliant on slides. In reality, the slides shouldn't be there to tell your story for you. They should just be there to support you. So it should be, if you're doing this right, it should be pretty easy to get rid of the slides, because you're just up there talking. You're weaving the story. You're taking them on this journey. So the slides shouldn't be telling the story for you to begin with. And so it just takes a little bit of practice to get comfortable without slides. I think people use slides as a crutch sometimes, because they really want to, not forget anything. But if you've woven a good story and you've told it a few times, then it really doesn't matter, because you'll have the gist, the most important points will be there, and then the rest of it becomes a conversation where you can really dig into the details that might have been on a slide that you didn't include.
Yep. Robert is asking that, he loves sales pitch, and how do you kind of look at sales pitch versus the fundraising pitch? He loves talking to potential customers, but not so much fundraising. What do you see maybe the differences there?
Well, again, going back to what I said at the very beginning, I called this book Winning Money, Mentors, and More for Your Startup. And the more part is really important. The more part is the sales pitch, is the pitch to the media to get press, get people to write about you. It is to early customers. It is to employees. And so the sales pitch should not be the investor pitch. They are two very different things, but the underlying principles are the same. The sales pitch, you need to know who your audience is. You need to know who they are, do some research on them. Again, it's just as personal in a sales pitch as it is in an investor pitch. So know who you're pitching to, know what they care about, know what they're trying to solve. A sales pitch is all about communicating the value of what you bring, and getting them comfortable working with a startup. That's a big challenge for startups, because a lot of times their customers need to be convinced to work with a startup because there's a lot of risk in it for them. So again, make appeal to an emotional pain that they have, or something that they feel about this problem, and kind of show how you're there to help and solve it, and that you're bringing value to the table that doesn't exist today. Value-based selling is really, really effective, because you're really understanding deeply what they need before you even talk about the product. You're empathizing, and you're trying to show that you understand how their world works. It's the same thing in investor pitch and the sales pitch in a lot of ways. And the sales pitch, obviously you're going to have a lot more about how it works and how, what's in it for them as a customer, versus in an investor pitch, you're going to have a lot more of the behind the scenes stuff.
It sounds like the book is kind of like soup to nuts, and you've covered like everything very concrete and practical.
It is.
We need to get our hands on the book.
It is. It's very comprehensive. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to write it, is because I felt like all this information can be found in all kinds of places around the internet, but there wasn't one place that had it all. So I'm pretty sure I got the whole pitch process down in there. You'll find, you'll find a chapter on design. You'll find a chapter on what slides need to be in your pitch deck and why. You'll find a chapter on different kinds of pitches, like an elevator pitch, which I didn't get into today, how to develop your elevator pitch. And then also there's a whole section on the different types of people you'll pitch, and how you need to modify the pitch when you're in front of certain kinds of people, based on the types of people that early stage entrepreneurs come in contact with.
Great.
So buy the book.
Yeah, definitely. Another question here from Teka. He's asking maybe what's a good phrase to ask or nudge someone to invest time in your company? Are there any particular phrases like that that could nudge someone?
Well, it obviously can't be packaged in just one phrase, but I think the hope part that I talked about in your 4-H flow, if your hope part is really good, people will lean in and they'll be clamoring to help you. And the key to making that good, the key to that phrase is inviting them on the journey with you, inviting them to be part of it, and painting a picture of a world that they want to be part of. So a lot of times, like I said, it's an imagine if statement, or it's a wouldn't it be great if, or imagine a world where, you know, so you're starting off with that sentence, and by just saying imagine a world where, the person listening starts to imagine it. It's funny how words have power like that. So I think a lot of that can live in your hope statement, sort of taking them away from the ground floor where you're at right now in this early part of your journey and what this smaller thing you're working on, and showing them what ultimately the bigger, most incredible thing is about what you're going to do to change the world.
And sell them your vision.
Yeah, sell them your bigger vision about where you're going to be in 2 years versus right this second.
Great. Next question from Lisa. She's asking, what are maybe some do not do's in pitches? Maybe something that's too technical, or something to avoid.
I don't recommend doing a demo in your first pitch to someone. I think there are too many things that can go wrong in a live demo. You can certainly show screenshots as part of your deck if your user experience is part of your special sauce. But I wouldn't do a demo in a pitch if you can avoid it. If you have a food product, I also wouldn't hand out the food product before the end also, because people will stop paying attention to you. I wouldn't hand out a hard copy of the deck either before, or send it in advance. You can send a teaser deck, but I wouldn't send the whole thing in advance. And then again, a lot of it is body language. So watch your body language when you're pitching. When people get defensive, it shows in their body. So if people are giving you feedback that you don't like, a helpful tip is to have sort of a trigger word in your head. So if you're starting to feel that like angst of someone criticizing you and telling you your baby's ugly, maybe you have a trigger word, whatever it is for you, you say it in your head, and you just calm down, and you understand that they are giving you a gift of feedback, and just take it for what it's worth, because the worst thing you can do is be defensive and show that you're not open to working with other people. I was in a pitch, and it was in a classroom at Babson, and the chalkboard was behind the pitcher, and he got a question he didn't like, and as he was being defensive talking about it, he was like slowly walking backwards in the classroom until he hit the wall behind him. So like he literally hit a wall figuratively and mentally, because he was being defensive in his words and his body. So watch your body, watch what your body is doing.
And you said to stand up when you're pitching on Zoom?
Yes, definitely stand up when you're pitching on Zoom. Physically, it helps because it frees up your diaphragm for breathing much more. And then mentally, it helps because you're just feeling a little bit more professional. Your body's at attention. Those things can help subconsciously for you to, feel like you can be more confident in what you're doing.
Great. Next question from Jian Ding. She's asking suggestions on practice pitching if it's not your full-time job and you're not in business development. How do you actually practice going through the pitching, the motion?
Well, practice is the number one thing you need to do, right? I mean, it's so important. And the truth is, if you just pitch to every single person you meet along the way, whenever somebody is asking you, what are you working on? That's an opportunity to give your elevator pitch and get really comfortable with it. Your elevator pitch is, a 20-second description of what you're doing. And it should come out of you like breathing, like it's just so natural that it doesn't even feel like a pitch. So that's one good way to do it, is just lay it on everybody you meet. If it's a longer investor pitch, get some friends who know a little bit about what you're working on, but not a lot, and just ask them to spend time with you, an hour with you, to watch your pitch and give you some feedback. Most people can provide some good feedback on you, even if they don't know a ton about what your business is about, because ideally what you're communicating is so simple that anybody could understand it. And so if it's not understandable to this person who isn't knee deep in your industry, then it's probably needs to be revamped. And then the last thing is if, film yourself. Everybody's got a camera these days, so put on your iPhone and film yourself pitching and watch it and sort of see where you think you're falling flat or it's not working the way you want it to work. That's, obviously it's better to have other people's opinion, but if you're, just want to practice at home, just filming yourself can go a long way to seeing where you're weak.
Great. Yeah, pitching everyone is always great, just to get feedback and doing maybe that grandma test if you're
the grandma test.
Yeah. Question from Jujubi. She's asking, being coachable is important. If a founder doesn't have strong belief, is that necessarily a good quality to have? Maybe you can talk about the importance of being coachable and accepting like the general consensus of your advisors if they're advising you otherwise.
I lost you for a second there. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, Jujubi's asking, being coachable is important. If a founder doesn't have a strong belief or vision, is that necessarily a good quality to have? And maybe the importance of being coachable.
Well, so coachability is really important, but like I said, you shouldn't feel like you need to take every piece of feedback you're given. Investors and mentors do want you to have a very confident sense of where you're headed. They don't want to see you as like, I wouldn't ever recommend going to advisors and investors and saying, I have these 3 paths in mind, which one do you want to do? That isn't actually what being coachable is about. What you want to do is be confident in the path that you're taking, but if people have things to add to it or feedback on it, take that and be open to it. But it's not about sort of laying yourself bare and saying, I don't really know which way to go, but I'd love for you to tell me. Investors do not like that because they want to know that you're very confident in your approach and that you've done the work to know what the right approach is.
Great. In the last 2 minutes we have, I don't know if you could just answer this question. So what excites you as an angel investor these days? What are you looking for in terms of opportunities? And maybe if you could speak to that.
What excites me? Well, I have a particular specialty in marketing tech and ad tech and sports tech. And consumer products. Those are sort of my areas. So that's what excites me. I just invested in a sports company, an online sports company, and that jazzes me. My other recent investment was in a fitness company. So I guess I'm kind of, I'm siloed into the industries that I know something about. And I guess that's the learning there, is that all investors have a sweet spot where they like to invest. They have certain industries that they care about, or they have a knowledge base that can be helpful to you. So the important part is that you go and you learn what those things are before you pitch to them, so that you know in advance that A, you're relevant to them, and B, you can ask them questions about their experience that could be helpful feedback for you. And in asking questions, you're building a relationship, right? You're starting to show that you really care about their opinion, and they're getting to see the real you. So I would recommend that you make sure you know your audience really well before you head into a pitch.
Okay, great. We just have 1 more minute left. Is there any particular call to action you would like from our community before Regina gets back on the line? And I'm going to drop your links in the chat for your Twitter and website.
Yeah, great. Thank you. You could also, I'm trying to see if I can drop something in the chat too. I was going to drop the link to the book. But if
I did. Yeah, the first book.com. Yep.
Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, for me, honestly, the feedback on the book has been phenomenal. I've been shocked actually at how much it's been helpful to people. And it's not just early stage entrepreneurs that are telling me that they love it. It's kind of entrepreneurs of all kinds, people within companies who need to convince people to do something, or just general communication and relationship building. And I guess that for me is really the main line here, is that pitching is personal. It's about building relationships, and particularly now when we're all so siloed at home and you know, missing being around people, that relationship building part is more important than ever. So don't underestimate the value of small talk, the value of eye contact, the value of following up, and just coming to every meeting with your best self and your intention of being open to what other people have to say to help you.